A fair share of sports teams have rolled through Sacramento over the years. A few, like the Kings and Rivercats, have stuck around. Most, though, were not so lucky. There are quite a few reasons for this. Unstable leagues, unstable owners, odd home venues, and in some cases, just being in the right place at the wrong time. Many of these franchises have long been forgotten, and even when they were in Sacramento, no one was really all that bothered to keep good records for them. I guess we just all wanted to believe Roller Hockey International was going to be here for the long haul. For those of us who fondly remember Chris Eddy, still stop by Leatherby's every once in a while and occasionally sing out, "I'm a great man!" Well, these sporting blasts from the past just may be familiar. I am Cheyenne Hollis. This is the Touchback, and today we root around the graveyard of Sacramento sports. But first, a message from a company keeping their memory alive. Like my Bill Goldberg Sacramento Surge jersey, ever wanted your very own David Archer Sacramento Gold Miners jersey, there is only one place to go, and that's Royal Retros. The company is keeping alive the memory of various old teams from Sacramento that aren't here with us today. And it's not just Sacramento, Northern California, and all of those leagues you might remember with fondness. But yeah, when it comes to Sac Attack merch, there's only one place to go, and that's Royal Retros. Use the promo code TOUCHBACK for 10% off your purchase at Royal Retros. Link is in the description of this video. Before we focus on the lost sports teams of Sacramento, I'd like to take a moment to highlight those still around but maybe flying under the radar. Sure, you know about the Kings and the Rivercats and the Republic, but here are a few sporting sides playing in the River City right now. The Sacramento Sirens of the Women's Tackle Football League have been around for 25 years now. The Rugby League playing Sacramento Immortals did win the NRL Las Vegas Nines tournament earlier in 2024. Staying with sports popular in Australia, Sacramento has a men's and women's Australian rules football team in the form of the Suns. It's just a bit of a shame they're affiliated with the perpetually terrible Gold Coast Suns. What are you gonna do? In soccer, if you look beyond Sac Republic, Sacramento Gold FC, and Racing Sacramento City FC can be found in the MPSL. Look, I know I am missing some teams here. It was not intentional by any means. These are the ones I know are playing in 2024. So again, if I did mention yours, it was not on purpose. I just couldn't find the details for it. Anyway, it's time to turn our attention to the Sacramento sporting teams that are no longer with us. And why don't we just go ahead and start with baseball? I'm not going to spend too much time focusing on these teams because I've already done a video covering the Solons and the Steelheads, which you can check out in the upper right hand corner of your screen. During the 1890s and 1980s, baseball teams really just came and went through Sacramento at breakneck pace. Eventually, though, the Sacramento Solons/Senators would show up in the 1910s and had a pretty nice run. The Sacramento Senators began play in 1918, changed their name to the Solons along the way, and played in the city until 1960. That is when they moved to Honolulu. This was a time when the Pacific Coast League, which was once seen as a rival to Major League Baseball on the West Coast, was experiencing severe decline. That was due to a loss of major players and the presence of Giants and Dodgers on the West Coast. A AAA version of the Sacramento Solons returned in 1974 and spent 3 seasons playing at Hughes Stadium out on the campus of Sacramento City College. Attendance was good, but the stadium was not, and the team moved after 1976. In 1999, baseball returned for the 3rd time to Sacramento, this time in the form of the Sacramento Steelheads. The independent league club stuck around for a single season with the arrival of the AAA Sacramento Rivercats, rendering them more or less obsolete. The story of baseball in Sacramento is fairly well known, but football in California's capital has a very intriguing history of its own and dates back all the way to the 1940s. That is when the Sacramento Nuggets of the PCPFL took the field for a few seasons. Very little proof of this actually exists in modern times. There's also no word on if the team was named after a certain supermarket that had been founded in Woodland in 1926. Next up is the Sacramento Buccaneers, one of the founding members of the Continental Football League's Pacific Division. This team had actually been playing a few years prior to that. Before this, they were called the Lancers and played in a much more regional league at the time. Details are quite scarce, just like the Nuggets though. As for the Bucks, the entire thing was sort of a disaster. The first season saw the team's players not paid for a period, coaches quit, very messy. Eventually, the Sacramento Buccaneers were sold, and the new ownership group rebranded the team as the Sacramento Capitals with an O. That'll be more important later on in our story. Anyway, the newly named team eked out a few more seasons in the Trouble League, but folded shortly before the 1970 campaign. Reportedly, the team was unable to sell enough season tickets to continue. The one thing I admire about the Sacramento Capitals is their logo, just the football with the Capital helmet on it. This thing is just preposterous, and I am all about it. 20 years after the demise of the Capitals with an O, the Sacramento surge of the World League of American Football appeared and finally quenched the Capitals' thirst for professional football. The team played their first year at Hughes Stadium before moving over to Hornet Stadium in 1992. That second season actually saw Sacramento become champions of the football world, the entire world. That's because they beat the Orlando Thunder in World Bowl 1992. The first ever sporting event I ever went to as a kid was actually a Sacramento Surge game, so I have some really fond memories of this franchise. All things considered, attendance was pretty good in both seasons played at Hughes Stadium and then Hornet Stadium. That was impressive considering just how bad both facilities were at the time. Unfortunately, the World League was not long for this world and would put a pause on activities after 1992. Thankfully, though, Sacramento did not have to wait long for the return of professional football. It would begin play the next season. Surge owner Fred Anderson basically transferred the entire team's operations over to the CFL for the 1993 campaign. It was the only American side in that first year, but would be joined by a few more in 1994. Things in the CFL weren't quite the same as the World League of American Football. For starters, the World League had a great sort of playing window for Sacramento. The CFL season at that time started in July and ran until November. In other words, you were playing a ton of games in Sacramento summer heat, and then the season ended well into the NFL season when everyone was focused on that. This was suboptimal to say the least. After 2 seasons trying to make the gold miners work in Sacramento, the team would move to San Antonio and rebrand themselves as the San Antonio Texans. After a 15-year professional football gap, the sport would once again return to Sacramento when the California Redwoods of the United Football League, no, the other United Football League, there you go, moved to Sacramento after their first season. The Mountain Lions spent their first 2 seasons playing at Hornet Stadium, and all things considered, I thought it was a pretty good experience. I mean, look, Hornet Stadium sucked and left the team dealing with the same issues that faced the Surge and Gold Miners a decade previously. It had next to no facilities, and that running track was a total buzzkill. Despite that, the Mountain Lions had pretty good attendance, especially in the scope of the UFL. Now, there are a few reasons for that. Firstly, the UFL's fall schedule meant the weather was pretty good when compared to the CFL. Even if the league didn't receive huge press and was relegated to Versus and other fourth-choice cable networks, it was still something to do for people in Sacramento. It was still interesting for us. That brings us to the second reason why the Mountain Lions were sort of successful. They had some interesting guys coming through that franchise. Denny Green was head coach and general manager for those first 2 seasons. Also on the coaching staff in that inaugural season was a young Mike McDaniel as running backs coach. Dante Culpepper obviously played for the team in 2010. That season also saw Andrew Sendejo suit up for the Mountain Lions before he would go on to have a pretty nice NFL career. And of course, the presence of John David Washington on the roster meant every once in a while, Denzel Washington, his father, would show up to Sacramento to watch the Mountain Lions play. Unfortunately, not even Hollywood could save the Mountain Lions, with the UFL sort of crumbling apart in 2012. Heading into the year, the league was on thin ice. Then Denny Green left the franchise before the start of the campaign. The Mountain Lions also decided to move from Hornet Stadium to Raleigh Field. This move was not particularly well received. In fact, those first few games in 2012, attendance declined noticeably from the 2011 figures. That also had to do with the team not being very good and no longer having Denny Green or other star power. It turns out that didn't even matter though, because the UFL would not finish the season. The only real negative I can think of when it comes to the Sacramento Mountain Lions has to be their absolutely preposterous logo, the S-shaped lion. Every time I look at this, I can't help but think it bears a striking resemblance to Trogdor, the Burninator. Now, it was not just outdoor football to have been played in Sacramento over the years. The Arena Football League had a blink and you miss it spell in the California capital. That took place in 1992 with the rival of the Sac Attack, a great name, but a franchise that just never connected with fans. After that sole disappointing season in Sacramento, the franchise was sold to a new ownership group who moved the team to Miami and eventually renamed it the Hooters. So yeah, without the Sacramento Attack, there's no Miami Hooters. That's something, I guess. The Attack played their home games at Arco Arena, so why don't we just stay out there in Natomas and talk about some of the other sporting tenets over the years. The Sacramento Monarchs did what the Sacramento Kings could not do during the 2000s and win a championship. They also arguably were in the right place at the absolute wrong time. The Maloofs, who had burned through all their money, dissolved the Monarchs after the 2009 season so they could focus their time and energy and not much money on relocating the Kings to just about any ridiculous city you can imagine during the late 2000s and 2010s. Had the Monarchs survived, though, had the Maloofs been able to fund them, I can't help but think that franchise would be thriving in the modern WNBA. A team very unlikely to be thriving today under any circumstances would be the Sacramento Knights. They had a nice run in the 1990s, but indoor soccer just has never ever been able to get its act together. Things were okay for the Knights under the Continental Indoor Soccer League banner. Many of those franchises, including the Knights, were owned by NBA or NHL owners who had access to arenas, probably got sweetheart deals. It just made a lot of sense. It gave them another tenant for the building, so it worked at least in that stretch of the 90s. It was even rumored that several teams in the CISL were profitable. Then 1997 rolls along, owners start bickering, and the league breaks up with the Knights moving to what would become the World Indoor Soccer League. It was stupid and just killed any momentum indoor soccer had built up during the 90s. As for the Knights, they would play in that league for a few more years before eventually folding after 2001. The most memorable thing for the Knights during that stint at Arco Arena was arguably their partnership with Round Table Pizza. You see, anytime a ball went into the stands, the person who caught the ball received a free, I think it was a medium pizza from Round Table, because you can't keep the balls, you have to return the ball. So that was sort of how they enticed fans into giving the ball back, was giving them a free medium Round Table pizza. Get it, Knights? Round Table? I'll give them credit for it, it worked. Sadly though, I went to Knights games over the years and never caught a ball, so no free pizza for me. Moving from one 1990s alt sport to another, man, did ESPN really want inline hockey to be a thing. They really went all out getting Roller Hockey International on ESPN2, and guess what? Even Sacramento joined in on the fun that was roller hockey. We were treated to the Sacramento River Rats, who played their first 2 seasons at Arco Arena. Then team owner and RIH co-founder Larry King, that's not him. That Larry King, he decided to move River Rats operations from Arco Arena, where the team was losing money, to Cal Expo. No one did any research on just how this arrangement would possibly play out. They built a $250,000 roller rink on top of a former rodeo staging area at Cal Expo. There was no cover or anything on top of that. It was just metal bleachers and a rink to play roller hockey on. Remember how I said no one did any research? Well, if they had, they would have realized that the rink they installed would not hold up to the Sacramento heat. That, by the way, is important because the RHI season ran from June, July, August. It was a summer league. Things just did not go well. The first Riverettes game at Cal Expo, the home opener, was called off because the venue wasn't finished in time. The team had to forfeit that game. Then the second game had to be canceled because the surface was just rolling up. It was unplayable due to the heat in Sacramento and the lack of a cover. Players also absolutely hated this arrangement at Cal Expo. Here is what Sacramento Riverrats forward Craig Chapman said about the Cal Expo situation. "The place is a joke. try skating in there with all the moss and bugs flying around and getting in your mouth. After one season outdoors at Cal Expo, the River Rats would cease operations. Sacramento's ice hockey team, which played between 1975 and 1980, did not fare much better, but thankfully they kept all of their games indoors at the Ice House, which was located on Bradshaw and Highway 50. At least that's where it was according to their program. I can't actually figure out where this facility was located at exactly, or if it has anything to do with the skating rink, which I believe is still out there, the rink on Bradshaw just off of Highway 50. I can't figure it out, but if you know anything about the Ice House off of Bradshaw, let me know in the comment section below. Regardless of that, to say the Rebels even played hockey would be a bit of an overstatement. It was mostly just fighting. The most laughable thing of all is that the team's logo clearly uses Yosemite Sam. This is just one of the most blatant cases of copyright infringement you will ever see, although I guess no one cared because it was minor league hockey in Sacramento. We head back to Cal Expo. The Sacramento Express of the short-lived professional rugby organization, otherwise known as Pro Rugby, had the highest attendance in the league by a fair amount. This isn't really saying much though. About 2,000 people turned up to see a few games at Bonnie Field in Sacramento in 2016. You could make a case for the Sacramento Express being successful, however, Pro Rugby suffered from a complete lack of promotion and folded after a single campaign. As for the previously mentioned Larry King, still not that guy. He had previously worked to bring professional sports to Sacramento, so he was no stranger to the scene. Prior to his dalliance with roller hockey, King was behind World Team Tennis, which had a presence here in the River City. While they never hosted home matches at Cal Expo, the Sacramento Capitals, with an A, not an O, played in just about every notable Sacramento suburb north of Highway 50 during their existence. Their first season took place in Natomas at Arco Arena 1 before taking up a residency at Gold River Racquet Club for 15 years. Gold River Racquet Club, of course, being in that weird space that's not quite Folsom and also not quite Rancho Cordova. And no, I'm not interested in you telling me it's Gold River. I do not recognize Gold River as a place in Sacramento, suburb or otherwise. Next up was a stint at Sunrise Mall in Citrus Heights, followed by some time at the Roseville Galleria in Roseville.
John L. Sullivan Chevrolet here in the Roseville Auto Mall.
After 28 seasons in Sacramento, the Capitals, that being Capitals with an A, announced they were leaving for Las Vegas. That move, though, never actually happened. The team's owner would be arrested for running a Ponzi scheme a few weeks later, and that franchise just sort of went away. World Team Tennis, though, did return to Sacramento a year later, this time in the form of the California Dream. Those owners had zero interest in using the Capitals name, which had been mentioned quite a bit in connection to the previous Ponzi scheme owners. The franchise returned to their previous home at Sunrise Mall, but the entire operation lost a huge amount of money and the dream folded after a single year. Finally, we conclude with a basketball franchise most Sacramentans probably didn't even know existed, playing in a league no one even realized was actually going on during the 2000s. Of course, we're talking about the Sacramento Heatwave of the ABA. That's right, the ABA returned. There was an ABA 2000s, and the entire thing was a bigger shit show than you could ever possibly imagine. We can pocket that story for another day. As for the Sacramento Heatwave, they had a stint in the ABA between 2006 and 2013, playing at various high school gyms over that span. Every year or two, the Heatwave would be featured on Good Day Sacramento. They'd have one of those puff packages, but by and large, I don't know if anyone in Sacramento outside of those who played for the Heatwave knew they existed. But yeah, there was a second basketball franchise in Sacramento during the 2000s and I guess early 2010s. There you have it, the lost sports teams of Sacramento. Look, I'll be honest with you, I probably missed a few in this list. The record keeping involved with a lot of these various sports franchises and alternative leagues that have stopped in the capital over the years is dicey at best. Simply finding proof they were here is not always easy, but this is most of them, I think, I hope. The saddest part of all of this isn't the reality that Sacramento has lost so many sports teams over the years. many of these teams just were never going to make it. The leagues they played in were doomed to fail, and when that wasn't the case, then the ownership groups just didn't have the capabilities to see the project through. That's sad, but the true tragedy here is that we are unable to drown our sorrows over losing all of these sports teams at Sacramento's original pizza joint, Shakey's. That remains Sacramento's biggest loss of all. How did we lose Shakey's Pizza? But hey, every time I'm in the Philippines, it's the first place I go. Thank you for watching this video. To learn about some of the potential sites for a ballpark to be built in Sacramento, video upper right hand corner of your screen, and to learn the story of how the Maloof brothers once sold the naming rights to Arco Arena to a company that was a huge scam, video lower right hand corner. Until next time, I'm Shine Hollis, this is The Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it out to the 25.
And when you get it, you gotta